we will learn together how we can look after our children and look after our next generation. Lord, we give the next few hours into your hands, and Lord, in Jesus' name we pray, amen. Okay, so I'm just gonna have a introduction to this topic about social emotional development of children. Okay, sorry. And so just bear with me. We're gonna do this in English because we will have quite a few visitors that don't really speak Indo, so this is why we're having it in English. But I think if you have any question, just feel free to ask, and there will be question and answer at the end. Okay, so if you have any burning question, you can raise your hand, and I'll try to answer. But otherwise, we'll do it at the end. Okay, so now I have a few questions here. If you can actually take out your phone, and this is the only time I'm gonna ask you to take out your phone. And so I will give you like a couple of minutes to actually read through the question and just jot down your answer, because I'm hoping that you'll be able to answer these questions at the end of the talk. So it's a false, true or false, okay? Can everyone see the questions? Yep, okay, cool. So just jot down the answers in your phone, and then we will go back and have a look at this question later, okay? All right, so everyone's ready? Yeah, everyone, yeah, I see a lot of nodding. Okay, all right. So now, the reason why I kind of propose about this talk is, you know, a few moms, we get to talk about our kids, you know, a lot at school. And also, if you don't know, like I do teach Sunday school as well at this church. And so we do have a lot of kids that come and go, and you know, like I do feel quite passionate about this topic as well, because I used to work in pediatrics when I was back in Sydney, and so this is why I'm quite passionate about this, because it's a very important area in children's development, but we don't know much about it because it's not really, like the information out there is not really utilized, okay? So it's not because there's no information, but there's a lot of information, but we just don't really know about it, okay? And I can see that, you know, even with my own patients at work, I can see that there is a lot of children that these days that have got issues, not with the IQ, but actually with their EQ. And EQ is becoming more and more important, and it's something that it's very sad, because it's something that we can do something about, okay? And you know, when you hear in the news about in Japan, for example, I've read a few articles about the generation where, you know, as adults, they don't come out of their room, they just stay in the house, and the parents had to still look after them as if they were little kids, and feed them and provide food. And these kids are not children, they're actually adults, but they are like children, because all they do all day is just in front of the computer on the screen, and they don't go out. Okay, so those are the generation that we are seeing at the moment, and it's really sad. And in the church, we don't want to have our kids to become that kind of generation. So this is why I'm also quite passionate about it. And there is something that we can do about it. So I'll just get on to the next slide. So basically, studies have shown that most of our child's brain development actually happens in the first 2,000 days of their life. So it's in the first 5 years of their life. Okay, so if you think that, my child is born and, when he or she is born, the brain is fully developed. So there's nothing else to improve. No, that's wrong. So our kid's brain is still developing until they're about 5 years old. So from the time of conception till they were about 5 years old, there's so many things that can injure their brain. And this is why it's a very important time in the first 5 years. And I will show you in the later slide about why is it so important, in the first 5 years. And actually the time that actually you spend connecting with your child is the most important thing that you can do to build their brain and their body. And so there have been a lot of studies where they look at children who live in the orphanage, and they don't get the same sort of physical touch or the same interaction as children who are raised in the home. And there have been a lot of studies that show that these kids who actually were raised in the orphanage in such a way they actually don't end up having a successful life in the end. Okay, so there's a lot of studies. You can Google it. I'm not telling lies. You just Google it. Information will be there. Okay, so the children's brain will grow if the children are receiving loving care and also human interaction. Okay, so I'm not talking just about after they're born, but also during conception. So, there's a lot of information out there, like mothers should actually, during conception, spend time, talk to the child. And some people might think it's silly. Why? The child is not born yet. Like, who am I talking to? But it's actually, that connection actually is very important, okay? And whatever the mom is feeling, whether it's fear or it's anxiety or it's happy, the child could feel it as well. Okay, so it's very important. Okay, and next slide. So let's just have a look at the science. So this is sort of like the picture of our brain. So you know that our brain is basically as big as a coconut. It looks like a walnut from far, but it's actually quite a dull color. It looks like uncooked liver, and it's like a jelly. Okay, so that's how our brain looks like. But beyond this structure of the brain, actually our brain actually have a very complicated communication inside. So I'm just going to show you the next slide, which is showing about, sorry, the picture might be a bit small. But if you look at the brain functional scheme, you can see that the brain is in charge of a lot of things. So the brain is in charge on speaking, on vision, reading, so a lot of things. So, and beyond that, our brain is also in charge of our social, emotional, and cognition. So what's the big deal about this social, emotional, and cognition? So, the physical is obviously obvious, right? It's about how we move, how we walk, how we talk, we hear, so that's physical. But social and emotional is something that you can't sort of see. It's how we think, how we behave, how we function. So cognition is all about, knowing how to, for example, cook something. So that's cognition. It's actually a very important aspect that we look at as doctors when we assess older people. So when we see that older people is starting to become, having dementia, we actually look a lot at the cognition. We look at how they're able to even boil a water, for example. So that cognition is very important. And, as kids, we don't really measure the cognition, but if you have a child who has got issues, that's something that we tend to look at as well. How the child is able to interact with their friends, how the child is able to, pack their bags and put their books in their bags and bring the bag home, for example. So that's part of the cognition, okay, and knowing how to do that. So basically, a healthy brain development is a prerequisite for all these function. So if our brain don't really function properly, maybe because there was an illness when the mom is pregnant or an injury when the child is born, then all these function would be affected. Okay, so I'm just going to take you to the next slide. So I'm sorry, this is quite a busy slide as well, but basically I wanted to explore about our brain and how our brain function in relationship. So our feelings and emotions are actually connected to other people and communicated to other people in two ways. One is in a conscious way and unconscious way, okay? So now, conscious way is obvious. So, when we talk and we express our feelings to people, that's conscious way of expressing our emotion and feelings, right? Being angry at someone is conscious. But in an unconscious way is quite a complicated process. So there's different theories that actually look into this. So I've listed just those three. So one is the hormonal and neurochemical reaction. So what is that? So basically when we are actually babies, when babies look at their mom, they see a positive response, okay? Then it will trigger a release of pleasure chemicals in the brain. And then that release of the chemicals actually would calm the baby down and help this baby to grow and feel safe. So that's the hormonal and neurochemical reaction. Okay, so it's something that you can't see, but it's something that as babies, they are able to have this connection with their parents through that neurochemical pathway. Okay, and then the next is the low road and the high road. So what is the low road and the high road? I will explain later in next slide. The theory about this, the low road and the high road, is basically about how our brain function in different ways. So you probably heard about the fight or flight mode, and so that's part of this. So I'll explain in the next slide. But also in our brain, we also have got this thing called the mirror neurons. So the mirror neurons actually function to link our motor action to how we perceive things. So this allows us to be able to read how other people's feelings. So for example, with mirror neurons, if our friend is angry, sometimes we can get affected too. So that's what mirror neurons do, okay? But I will show you the next slide, which is this one. Okay, I don't know, can you see? Oh, let me show you. So this one is the sensory cortex, right? So, oops. Normal light. How come there's no? Okay, you see these three circles, right? And then there's the orange one. So the orange one is basically part of the brain called the amygdala, okay? And the top one is our sensory cortex, and then the one on the left is the sensory thalamus. So basically, the high road is when we have this emotional stimulus. For example, when we see something shocking to us, then what we see, the signal will be sent to the brain, and then the brain will send a signal to the amygdala, that will allow us to produce a response, okay? So that response is the normal response. But when we are seeing something that is dangerous, that response is, there is another response called the low road, which is the direct line from this to this. And that's the one that is like sensing the danger, and straight away that part of the brain sends a signal to the amygdala, or the orange circle, to tell us that, hey, there is a danger. So that will happen before the normal pathway happens, okay? So, for example, this theory is actually explained a lot by a professor in the New York University. So that professor is called Professor Joseph Ledoux. So you can actually read up about it if you like. It's very interesting, very hard to read the information. And so a writer who used to work as a therapist, Angus Lyon, from the UK, actually he wrote a book about how this interaction is. And he used the example of a bear. So basically, his explanation about this response is that if you are, so he used his story. He was walking in the park with another friend, and they were walking in the park, and then they actually saw or heard a bear coming, okay? So, so basically, that hearing of a bear approaching trigger a response. So the response is fear, right? So that fear was already sent to the amygdala, which is the orange part, and it will already cause him and his friend to freeze. So before even seeing the bear, just hearing it, both of them freeze. And that's the low road. But after that, when they were in that state of freeze, then they saw the bear coming. So then they freeze even more, and because they have that sense, visual stimulus to say that there is a bear. So that explains this response, okay? So basically, our body is made up, and we have these two responses, that we are able to sense fear first before we actually see. So this is actually the flight response, the fight and flight response, okay? So is that okay? Is that, yeah, all right. So, so the same way, if you think about it, so this is we as adults, but kids or babies, they have this response as well. Everybody has this response. However, there are ways that, there are things that can affect this response, okay? All right. So basically, our young children actually develop through their relationship with important people in their lives. So our brain is actually a very social organ. So the more we interact with other people, the more the brain will develop, right? And so the quality of this attachment is also very important. So if a child's experiences in the early life is bad, for example, you see kids who have gone through domestic violence, or kids who are growing up with parents who are anxious all the time, have a lot of worries, then obviously it will create sort of that flight and fight response in them, so that they have got a much bigger sort of sense of anxiety, okay? And this development of their anxiety later will implicate their life later, because then they will grow up to be a person who's more anxious than other people who don't grow up in those family. Okay, so this exposure is not just when they were older, but also, remember, in pregnancy, baby stage, up to the first 5 years of their life. Okay, so if the first 5 years of the life, this baby is being exposed to a lot of all these negative stimulus, then obviously they will grow up having the same kind of negative response. Okay, so next slide. So there's been a lot of studies that actually looked into like the importance of why emotional development and empathy is in a child's future, and so basically, why is so important? Because whatever, like I mentioned before, emotional development that begins early in life, it is a critical aspect in the development of the overall brain architecture, and has that consequence over the course of the lifetime of the person. Okay, and so the foundations of social competence that are developed in the first 5 years are linked to emotional well-being and affect the child's later ability to functionally adapt in school and form successful relationship throughout life. Okay, so I don't come up with this statement, but actually there is the National Scientific Council on Developing Child in 2005 that actually came up with this statement, and it is still the statement that we hold on to up to today. So there's no new findings on this, so this is basically fact, okay? And I've looked through what I was, when I was working in pediatrics before, all the information that I had at that time, with today, it's basically the same. So we are still using those information from as far as 2005, okay? Because I thought I mentioned it because my husband, when he looked at it, he said, your information is very old. And I said, well, there's nothing new because this is it, you know? And so that's the reason, okay? And Australia, we actually have got studies that Australia likes to do a lot of surveys. So there'll be a survey study that I will show you. Okay, so the core feature of emotional development or emotional intelligence or EQ is that basically the ability for somebody to identify and understand their own feelings, to accurately read and comprehend emotional states in other people, to manage strong emotions and their expression in a constructive manner, and to regulate one's behavior, and also to develop empathy for others and establish and sustain relationships. So it all sounds the same, but actually they're quite different. Okay, and it's quite complicated, this thing about EQ. So this is the survey that Australia did. So they actually went to schools and they actually interviewed some of the parents, and they did this strengths and difficulty questionnaire. And this is dated back 2013, 2014. I think the information is quite obvious that we haven't had any more new surveys after this. But basically, that survey showed that 1 in 10 children actually scored in the concerning range. And I would say that there is probably more now than back in 2013 and 14. And I'll tell you why later. There'll be more than this. And also the proportion of children who scored in the range of concern. Okay, I'll show you actually using this. Can you see? So basically, this one is the age group. So as the child grows, the score is actually higher. So you can see that this dark spot is actually bigger and bigger as the child grows. So basically, as the child grows, there's actually more concern, okay? And when they look at boys and girls, so this is boys, this is girls. Boys actually is more concerning than girls, okay? And the next slide, I'm going to show you all. Sorry, this is a small slide. But basically, we are here in Australia. So Australian-born kids actually, compared to overseas-born kids, have higher concern. So kids who are born in Australia have got higher concern than kids who are born overseas. Okay, and these lines are basically kids born from one parent or one carer family. This one, so one carer family. That's two parents. So children born from who have mom and dad, they actually show less concern than kids who only have one parent. Okay, which is obvious. And kids born from a blended family also have higher concern. Okay, so and this one is looking at Australia and other country. So Australia, overseas have less concern. But if you live in the outer regional or in the remote outer regional, actually, you actually have more concern. And surprisingly, people who live in the remote area, they have less concern. Why? Because I think people who live in the remote area, their values, they normally have stronger culture beliefs, stronger values, and that is actually a protective factor. So, you know, we all here and we all, you know, coming from non-Caucasian background, we actually have got our own culture belief. That should be a protective factor for our kids. Okay, and this is what I want to stress with this slides. Okay, so the next one. So you will see some familiar faces there. So basically, socially and emotionally competent children, they are kids who are confident and they have good relationship. They communicate well with other people, with the older, their peers or even younger kids. They do better at school. They take on and persist with challenging tasks. They don't give up easily. And they will develop necessary relationship to succeed in life. So this is why EQ is important, not just for that moment, but later in life, because, you know, like we can't teach our kids later in life, hey, you know, you have to do this so that you can get this job, you know, so we can't do that. We can't do that forever, okay? Okay, so now very interestingly, when I was looking for information for this talk, I came across like an Indonesian, as I say, researcher who actually did a study on factors influencing social emotional development in children. So basically, there's a lot of research out there, and basically they say the same thing. But this group of researchers from Indonesia, interestingly, put risky behavior and device use as one of the factors that can influence social emotional development in children. And this is something which the other researchers have not added, which is quite interesting to me. So basically, you know, you see that other factors that influence social emotional development are, you know, we talk about socioeconomic characteristic, the mother and child interaction, the parent psychological condition. So before I mentioned, if you have parents who have got mental health issues, who are anxious all the time, then it will affect their development later. And also attachment and parenting. So if you are very non-hands-on, just, you know, like let your kids do whatever, that will impact their emotional development as well, and the school learning program as well. But I will actually speak a little bit more about this risky behavior and device use, because I think it's something that a lot of parents here struggle with at the moment, including myself, okay? So we are learning together. Okay. I will just show you, okay, so I will just show you this one first before we go back. Why this device use is very important to me, because I see a lot of my patients as well, they actually have got this problem. they have kids who have issues with their emotional regulation, and when you explore about why, why they are like that, then you realize that these kids actually use a lot of mobile phones, play a lot of games, and it not only affect their behavior, but also it affects their sleep. And it's quite sad to see. And a lot of times, my advice would be to the parents is, okay, you have to limit the device use and get them to sleep early and away from their phone. So this is, I'm learning this as well, okay? So basically, there is a book. For some reason, I forgot to bring that book. But there is a book on how to help our kids to be away from using high technology. And I will actually bring the book for those in church tomorrow, so to show you the book. But it's a very good book, and I think those who have kids in Rehoboth, they actually gave out that book. And I was wondering why they give out the book. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll just read it. And it's actually very good. It's written by a Christian author from Canada. And he wrote in there a lot of tips and how we can actually help our kids to be tech-free, okay? So in that book, it's also written that there is a child psychiatrist and researcher in America, Dr. Victoria Dunkley. She actually noticed there's a lot more and more children presented to her with behavioral issues, and they actually present earlier, younger age compared to before. So this is something that I have also noticed as well. And when she sees them and interviews them, she realized that electronic media has actually quite a significant role in causing these children to present in such behavior issues. And why? Because this electronic use gives them this hyper-arousal state. And that leads them to have this chronic stress, and it affects their developing brain, okay? So not only it affects their developing brain, but it also affects their brain chemistry. It affects their sleep. It affects their thinking, their mood, and behavior and social skills later on, okay? And so basically, she described the interactive media as like a stimulant. And it stimulates somebody, and then after that, when you take the device away, it's like a crash. And that's how she described it. So it's like having like a very exciting thing, and then you, like, for example, driving a car, and then you go into car crash. So basically, that's how she describes it, okay? And this results in the end in emotional dysregulation and loss of learning. Okay, so quite significant. And this is not just the only person who noticed that, but there is another expert, so one of the world's foremost addiction expert, so Dr. Nicholas Kardaras. So he said that the brain imaging studies, so he used brain imaging to do MRI on the kid's brain. He said that studies showed that excessive screen exposure can neurologically damage a young person's developing brain in the same way as somebody who is having cocaine addiction, okay? And he said that Minecraft may equal brain cocaine in young kids. So just, it's young kids, okay? So Minecraft is actually used a lot. Maybe in older children it's fine, but young kids, no, okay? And also, not to mention, so he mentioned that, but I've seen that, you know, how screen time can impact our kids, not just the developing brain, but the eyes. It affects their vision, and also it increases their risk of being exposed to pedophiles. And this is actually quite serious. So I will show you in the next slide that this one. So I don't know if anyone knows about Roblox. Have anyone heard about Roblox? Yes. Okay. I'm not specifically trying to defame Roblox, and but this is something that I see from time to time, even in our Australian newspaper, about how Roblox is not a safe media for use in kids because of their risk of endangering our children to pedophiles. So this is just one of the example. Sorry, this picture, it's a bit explicit, but I think it tells a lot, right? So if we see this as this is something not appropriate, what about exposing that to our kids? Okay. And there's a huge lawsuit against Roblox in the US, and it's happening at the moment. If you Google Roblox lawsuit, it brings a lot of information about who sues what and what is the reason. And the reason is basically because of safety. So Roblox say that they have actually done a lot of safety features to make sure that this game is safe, but in actual fact, it's not. And pedophiles can actually contact kids and bring these kids to a different type of platform so that these kids can actually be groomed to even later on meet this person and later on even becoming sexually abused by this person. So it's a very important thing. So I think not only Roblox features can be quite aggressive and can be quite scary for little kids, but also it increases their risk of being exposed to pedophiles. Okay, so then I wanted to share with you about so what I've been saying is about social media, right? But actually, there's different type of media. There is this passive and interactive media. So passive screen activities are things like, watching the TV, streaming shows, going to a movie, talking to, your family on the video chat. So those are passive screen activities. And passive screen activities are different in terms of risk as compared to the interactive screen activities, such as video games or internet surfing or social media. They're actually quite different. So with passive screen, I see it as a one-way thing, but with interactive screen, it exposes the child to totally different activities, yeah? Okay. So interactive media is actually very appealing, and it's designed to, to keep us engaged and entertained. So you want to do more on this interactive media, and that's if you are able to get hooked onto a game for a long time. Then the game maker has already done its job. So this is why the danger in kids, okay? Because it's, as I mentioned before, it's like a cocaine, okay, to the kid's brain. So the right balance is actually needed between the type of device that we use, the apps that we allow our kids to see, and actually the amount of time that is spent with the social media. So we as parents also need to know the risk, and I mean, I tend to watch what my kids are doing on the phone, and sometimes I do learn to try to actually play their games, just to see like, okay, why is so addictive? So I learned that as well, just so that I know what they're playing with. Okay, so I just want to leave a little bit of tips of what we can do. So these tips are not coming just from me, but it's also coming from that book. The author wrote that, as parents, we can restrict the app and filter on our internet, and we can actually grade up our kids' access to the smartphone as they grow. So, so to have quite a balanced access. And I haven't done this, but he suggested digital contracts with our kids to establish boundaries. I thought, oh, this is a good idea. Maybe I should do it with my kids too. And also as parents, we should actually be well informed about the negative impacts on social media, and that way we know how to control it. Okay, and also think about other non-screen activities with your children. So kids love to play. So if you can try to have non-screen activities with your kids on the weekend, for example. So, and I'm not saying that we should do this ourselves, but if you have friends who have the same mind, the community who have the same mind, I think it'll be great to help each other to actually establish these non-screen activities, because it takes a village to raise a child, right? Okay. And I just wanted to show you as well the resources that is available here in terms of parenting and mental health. So, and these resources haven't changed. So these resources were there when I was working in community pediatrics in 2012, and it's still the same. And I use it as well. Like raisingchildrennet.au is actually a very good government website on kids. So it talks about all sorts of problems. And I try to look about how to manage tantrum in my kids before in this one. And it's very wordy. So if you like something to read to keep you to put you to sleep, read this, because it will help. But the information there is very good, okay? And that's sort of like a broad Australian website, but specifically to Perth, I think we have Ngala. So Ngala is sort of a WA-based government organization that actually helps a lot with parents with who have kids with issues. So that also includes sleeping problems. I have referred, so that also includes sleeping problems. I have referred patients to Ngala as well to help kids who have sleep issues. And also, I don't know if some of you are aware, but there is a parenting course that it's free that you can actually access. It's called the Triple P Parenting. In the Eastern States, they use a lot of this Triple P Parenting. And I used to work with the Triple P group, and we actually did a, so this one here, we actually did a website, sorry. This one here, we actually did a website and an app to help parents in improving the social emotional development in their children. And we did this back in 2012. It was a very, how to say, not difficult, but it was very exhaustive process, because it's a government program, and anything to do with social media and government doesn't do very well. So it takes a lot of convincing for us to even get the funding to do this website and also app. So for those who have little kids, it's actually, I still think that it's actually a very good app, because it talks about, if you download the app, it actually, you can put your kid's date of birth, and then it will take you to the kid's developmental stage of that child at that age. So, but this is only for 0 to 5, okay? And if you have the app, it will send you reminders what to do with your baby, and how to improve your social emotional connection with your baby, okay? So that's for kids. And as for mental health in teenagers, and so from 12 to 24, government have got this Headspace that actually has a range of programs. Now, I don't know how easy it is in WA. We have quite a sort of limited spaces in WA with Headspace. So I think in the Eastern State, Headspace is quite widely used. I used to work at that back in 2012, 2014, next to Headspace. So we used to refer a lot to Headspace, but in WA, there's only a few places. So I use a lot of private mental health services. So our next speaker is Kelly, and I do refer a lot to Kelly and her team. And so these are available resources for mental health and for parents. Okay, so back to this question. Okay, so if you remember those questions that your answer, what do you think? So the social emotional development of children is actually important for the future. And it's the first 5 years of life that is actually most significant in a child's development. So EQ is as important as IQ nowadays. And our culture background, basically our culture background actually affects our children's social emotional development. And okay, the last question is a bit of, is it normal for our children to throw tantrum? Yes, it is. But if they are showing consistent, excessive behavioral exhibit and becoming aggressive and irritable all the time, if they don't get what they want, then this is not normal. Okay, and yeah. So. Okay, so I think if that's okay, we can have like a 10-minute break, 10-15 minutes break, coffee break, and then we will resume, and we'll have our next speaker, Kelly. Oh, questions. So do you have any burning questions? Yes? Yeah. The red button. Yep.
So as you mentioned, the first 5 years like the most important years of the kids to build that relationship, to actually build that the grow with the EQ. Okay, so for some parents, they're past that 5 years now. Is there a chance for us to, as parents, to help the kids at home, other than just limit their devices or probably play with them more? Is there anything else that we can do that we think like, oh, okay, we probably didn't do enough in the first that 5 years, but they're now like what, 6, 9, is like, what can we do?
Yes.
As parents?
Excellent question. This is why we have our next speaker, Dr. Cassidy. And you will also hear from Lina about her experience as well. So yes, there is a chance. If you miss that first 5 years, there's always a chance that we can improve our kids' social emotional development later. Yes, definitely. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay. Why don't we just one more.
Thank you, Dr. Shelley. That was so informative. I just want to ask, do you have any suggestion on what are the most impactful interactions we can do with our babies? Now that we're busy or dad is busy, but maybe there are some interactions that are more impactful than others?
Yes. So basically, if you I just mentioned to you about that app and the website. Basically, it stands for Love, Talk, Sing, Read, and Play. Okay. So for babies, what you can do is love them. Okay, so the physical touch is actually quite important to connect with babies. And also, remember, babies can feel your anger, can feel your anxiety, can feel your sadness. So it doesn't mean that you should be happy all the time with your baby, but remember those. So as parents, I think of babies, you can take it easy and try to spend a lot more physical connection with your baby. Yeah, and when the baby knows when you kiss the baby, when you actually spend time to talk, even though you think the baby don't understand, but they do. They don't understand exactly what you're saying, but they have that connection with you when you actually talk to your baby. Yeah. So what you can do is talk to the baby, sing to the baby, love the baby, play. You can play with your baby. Yeah. Okay, so we'll just have a 10-15 minutes break. Yeah. And and we regroup. Okay. So the teas and coffees are here in the other room. Hello. I'm Shirley. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming.